The Coming of Stories, Seneca. Long ago, there were no stories in the world. Life was not easy for the people, especially during the long winters when the wind blew hard and the snow piled high about the longhouse. One winter day, a boy went hunting. He was a good hunter and managed to shoot several partridge. As he made his way back home through the snow, he grew tired and rested near a great rock, which was shaped almost like the head of a person. No sooner had he sat down than he heard a deep voice speak. "I shall now tell a story," said the voice. The boy jumped up and looked around. No one was to be seen. "Who are you?" said the boy. "I am Great Stone," said the rumbling voice, which seemed to come from within the earth. Then the boy realized it was the big standing rock which spoke. "I shall now tell a story." "Then tell it," said the boy. "First, you must give me something," said the stone. So the boy took one of the partridge and placed it on the rock. "Now tell your story, grandfather," said the boy. Then the great stone began to speak. It told a wonderful story of how the earth was created. As the boy listened, he did not feel the cold wind, and the snow seemed to go away. When the stone had finished, the boy stood up. "Thank you, grandfather," said the boy. "I shall go now and share this story with my family. I will come back tomorrow." The boy hurried home to the longhouse. When he got there, he told everyone something wonderful had happened. Everyone gathered around the fire, and he told them the story he heard from the great stone. The story seemed to drive away the cold, and the people were happy as they listened, and they slept peacefully that night, dreaming good dreams. The next day, the boy went back again to the stone and gave it another bird which he had shot. "I shall now tell a story," said the big stone, and the boy listened. It went on this way for a long time. Throughout the winter, the boy came each day with a present of game. Then Great Stone told him a story of the old times. The boy heard the stories of talking animals and monsters, tales of what things were like when the earth was new. They were good stories, and they taught important lessons. The boy remembered each tale and retold it to the people who gathered at night around the fire to listen. One day, though, when the winter was ending and the spring about to come, the great stone did not speak when the boy placed his gift of wild game. "Grandfather," said the boy, "tell me a story." Then the great stone spoke for the last time. "I have told you all of my stories," said Great Stone. "Now the stories are yours to keep for the people. You will pass these stories on to your children, and other stories will be added to them as years pass. Where there are stories, there will be more stories. I have spoken. Naho." Thus it was that stories came into this world. To this day they are told by the people of the Longhouse during the winter season to warm the people. Whenever a storyteller finishes a tale, the people always give thanks, just as the boy thanked the storytelling stone long ago. The Coming of Gluskabe, Abenaki. After Doubledock had finished making the earth, he dusted his hands off, and some of that dust sprinkled on the earth. From that dust, Gluskabe formed himself. He sat up from the earth and said, "Here I am." So it is that some of the Abenaki people call Gluskabe by another name, Ojihozo, which means the man who made himself from something. He was not as powerful as Doubledock the owner, but like his grandchildren, the human beings, he had the power to change things, sometimes for the worse. When Glus Gabé sat up from the earth, the owner was astonished. "How did it happen now that you came to be?" he said. Then Glus Gabé said, "Well, it is because I formed myself from this dust left over from this creation that you made." "You are very wonderful," the owner told him. "I am wonderful because you sprinkled me," Glus Gabé answered. "Let us roam around now," said the owner. So they left that place and went uphill to the top of a mountain. There they gazed about, open-eyed, so far around they could see. They could see the lakes, the rivers, the trees, how all the land lay, the earth. Then the owner said, "Behold here how wonderful is my work. By the wish of my mind I created all this existing world, oceans, rivers, lakes." And he and Glus Gabé gazed open-eyed. The Earth on Turtle's Back, Onondaga. Before this earth existed, there was only water. It stretched as far as one could see, and in that water there were birds and animals swimming around. Far above, in the clouds, there was a skyland. In that skyland there was a great and beautiful tree. It had 4 white roots which stretched to each of the sacred directions, and from its branches all kinds of fruits and flowers grew. There was an ancient chief in the skyland. His young wife was expecting a child, and one night she dreamed that she saw the great tree uprooted. The next morning she told her husband the story. He nodded as she finished telling her dream. "My wife," he said, "I am sad that you had this dream. It is clearly a dream of great power, and as is our way, when one has such a powerful dream, we must do all that we can to make it true. The great tree must be uprooted." Then the ancient chief called the young men together and told them that they must pull up the tree. But the roots of the tree were so deep, so strong, that they could not budge it. At last, the ancient chief himself came to the tree. He wrapped his arms around it, bent his knees, and strained. At last, with one great effort, he uprooted the tree and placed it on its side. Where the tree's roots had gone deep into the skyland, there was now a big hole. The wife of the chief came close and leaned over to look down, grasping the tip of one of the great tree's branches to steady her. It seemed as if she saw something down there, far below, glittering like water. She leaned out further to look, and as she leaned, she lost her balance and fell into the hole. Her grasp slipped off the tip of the branch, leaving her with only a handful of seeds as she fell down, 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 down. Far below, in the waters, some of the birds and animals looked up. "Someone is falling towards us from the sky," said one of the birds. "We must do something to help her," said another. Then 2 swans flew up. They caught the woman from the sky between their wide wings. Slowly they began to bring her down toward the water where the birds and animals were watching. "She is not like us," said one of the animals. "Look, she doesn't have webbed feet. I don't think she can live in the water." "What shall we do?" said another of the water animals. "I know," said one of the water birds. "I have heard that there is earth far below the waters. If we dive down and bring up earth, then she will have a place to stand." So the birds and animals decided that someone would have to bring up earth. One by one they tried. The duck dove down first, some say. He swam down and down, far beneath the surface, but could not reach the bottom and floated back up. Then the beaver tried. He went even deeper, so deep that all was dark, but he could not reach the bottom either. The loon tried, swimming with his strong wings. He was gone a long, long time, but he too failed to bring up earth. Soon it seemed that all had tried and all had failed. Then a small voice spoke. "I will bring up earth or die trying." They looked to see who it was. It was the tiny muskrat. She dove down and swam and swam. She was not as strong or as swift as the others, but she was determined. She went so deep that it was all dark, and still she swam deeper. She went so deep that her lungs felt ready to burst, but she swam deeper still. At last, just as she was becoming unconscious, she reached out one small paw and grasped at the bottom, barely touching it before she floated up, almost dead. When the other animals saw her break the surface, they thought she had failed. Then they saw her right paw was held tightly shut. "She has the earth," they said. "Now, where can we put it?" "Place it on my back," said a deep voice. It was the great turtle who had come up from the depths. They brought the muskrat over to the great turtle and placed her paw against his back. To this day there are marks on the back of the turtle's shell which were made by muskrat's paw. The tiny bit of earth fell on the back of the turtle. Almost immediately it began to grow larger and larger and larger until it became the whole world. Then the two swans brought the Sky Woman down. She stepped on to the new earth and opened her hand, letting the seeds fall onto the bare soil. From those seeds the trees and the grass sprang up. Life on earth had begun. Four Worlds, the Diné story of creation. Diné, Navajo. Before this world existed, there was a first world far below the world where we are now. In that world everything was black. There was darkness everywhere, and in that darkness there were 6 beings. Those beings were First Man, the son of night and the blue sky over the sunset; First Woman, the son of daybreak and the yellow sky of sunset; Salt Woman, Fire God, Coyote, and Begochidi. Begochidi, who was the child of the sun, was both man and woman, and had blue eyes and golden hair. There were no mountains or plants in that first world, so Begochidi began to make them. Begochidi made 4 mountains. To the east, Begochidi made a white mountain. To the south, Begochidi made a blue mountain. To the west, Begochidi made a yellow mountain. To the north, Begochidi made a black mountain. Then Begochidi created the ants and other insects and made the first plants. But things were not right in that first world. One story is that Fire God became jealous and started to burn everything up. According to another story, the first beings were just not happy in that dark world. Whatever the reason was, they decided to leave the first world. "Gather together the plants and the other things I have made," said Begochidi to First Man. First Man did as Begochidi said. Then he and the other beings came to the red mountain which Begochidi created in the center of the first world. There Begochidi planted the big reed. As the big reed began to grow, the first beings climbed into it. Up and up it grew, leaving the first world behind. It grew up until it came to the second world. In the second world, Begochidi created even more things. Begochidi created the clouds. Begochidi created more plants and mountains. The color of the second world was blue, and there were other beings in it, swallow people and cat people. The cat people tried to fight Begochidi and the others, but First Man used his magic and overcame them. For a time, everyone was happy. Then things began to go wrong. Once more, Begochitty planted Big Reed. Once more, Begochitty told First Man and the others to put all the things created into Big Reed. Big Reed began to grow. Up and up it went, and carried them all to the third world. The third world was yellow. Though there was no sun and no moon, the mountains gave light. It was the most beautiful of the worlds they had seen. In this world, Begochitty created rivers and springs. Begochitty made water animals and trees, birds and lightning. Then Begochitty created all kinds of human beings. In this beautiful third world, everything spoke one language. All of the things and beings in creation understood each other. But everything was not perfect in the third world. Yellow and red streaks appeared across the eastern sky. They were placed there by First Man and represented the diseases about to come to the people through evil magic. Before long, the men and women began to quarrel with each other. The men said that the women were causing trouble. The women said that it was the men. Coyote came to Begochitty and told him that men and women were always quarreling. Begochitty decided to put a stop to it. All of the men, Begochitty said, must stay on the right bank of the river. All of the women must stay on the left bank. Neither may cross the river to be with the other. So it was done. The men and women lived apart for some time, but they were not happy without each other. Finally, they went to Begochitty. Some say it was the women who came first, but others say it was the men. "We are not happy by ourselves," they said. "We wish to be reunited." So Begochitty brought men and women back together. "If there is more trouble," he warned them, "this third world will be destroyed by a flood." All of this time, Coyote was roaming around. Wherever he went, he was curious about everything, including things he should have left well enough alone. One day, Salt Woman went walking by the two big rivers Begochitty had made in this third world. When she came to a place where the rivers crossed, she saw something strange in the water. It looked like a baby with long black hair. She went back and told the others about it. Coyote decided to go and see for himself. Sure enough, there where the rivers crossed was a baby with long black hair in the water. Coyote lifted it out of the water and hid it under his blanket. He told no one what he had done. 4 days passed, and then a great noise was heard all around the third world. Begochitty knew what it was, knew what was going to happen. Someone had done wrong. Now this third world was about to be destroyed by flood. From the east, a black storm came. From the south, a blue storm approached. From the west came a yellow storm. From the north, a white storm swept. Once again, Begochitty gathered all the beings and things created. Once again, Big Reed grew up and up. It lifted all the beings and things as storm waters rose beneath them. This time, though, was not as easy as before. Big Reed stopped growing before it entered the next world. The spider people wove a web to bring them closer, but they could not break through into the new world. The ant people tried to dig through, but they could not do it. Finally, Begochitty told the locust to try. Using his hard head, the locust broke through into the fourth world. Now Begochitty climbed up through the hole the locust made. He found himself on an island with only water to be seen in all directions. Begochitty saw right away that there were others in this fourth world who had great power. To the east was Talking God. To the south was First Bringer of Seeds. To the west was House God. To the north was Second Bringer of Seeds. Begochitty waved to each of them. Then the four powerful beings made the waters recede, leaving a world covered with mud. Begochitty went back down Big Reed to the others. "Grandparent," said the others, "how is it in the new world?" "The new world is good," Begochitty said, "but it has not yet dried. Someone must try to walk up there. Who will try?" "I will go," said Badger. Then he went up through the hole and tried to walk on the new fourth world. His feet broke through the surface, though, and became covered with mud. To this day, all badgers have black feet. "This will not do," Begochitty said. "How can we dry this new world?" "We shall dry it," said the winds. Then the winds went up to the fourth world. The cyclones and the whirlwinds and the small dust devils went up to the fourth world. They swirled about and dried the surface well so the people could walk. Then the ant people went up and walked on the dried surface of the fourth world, and all the other people and created things followed. Begochitty, though, looked back down through the hole to the third world. The water there was still rising. "Who is the one who angered the water monster?" Begochitty said. No one answered, but Coyote pulled his blanket tighter around himself. "Open your blanket," Begochitty said. Then Coyote opened his blanket, and Begochitty saw the water baby. "You must give the water monster back its child," said Begochitty. Coyote did as Begochitty said. He dropped the water baby back down to the third world, and the waters receded. Now Begochitty went around the fourth world and placed things in order. The mountains were put in their places. The sun and moon and stars were put into the sky. Fire God tried to keep all the fire to himself, even though the people needed it to keep warm and cook their food. One night, though, as Fire God slept, Coyote stole fire from him and gave it to all the people. Then Begochitty told the human beings the right way to live, how to give thanks, how to care for the plants, such as corn and squash and beans. Begochitty gave them many different languages then, and sent them to live throughout the world. It was now in this fourth world that Changing Woman came to be. She became the greatest friend of the human beings, helping them in many ways. It was Changing Woman who gave birth to the hero twins, who traveled throughout the world doing great deeds, destroying the monsters that threatened the people. So the fourth world came to be. However, just as the worlds before it were destroyed when wrong was done, so too this fourth world was destined to be destroyed when the people do not live the right way. That is what the Diné say to this day. Luwit, the Firekeeper, Nisqually. When the world was young, the Creator gave everyone all that was needed to be happy. The weather was always pleasant. There was food for everyone and room for all the people. Despite this, though, two brothers began to quarrel over the land. Each wanted to control it. It reached the point where each brother gathered together a group of men to support his claim. Soon it appeared there would be war. The Creator saw this and was not pleased. He waited until the two brothers were asleep one night and then carried them to a new country. There a beautiful river flowed through, and tall mountains rose into the clouds. He woke them just as the sun rose, and they looked out from the mountain top to the land below. They saw what a good place it was. It made their hearts good. "Now," the Creator said, "this will be your land." Then he gave each of the brothers a bow and a single arrow. "Shoot your arrow into the air," the Creator said. "Where your arrow falls will be the land of you and your people, and you shall be a great chief there." The brothers did as they were told. The older brother shot his arrow. It arched over the river and landed to the south in the valley of the Willamette River. There is where he and his people went, and they became the Multnomas. The younger brother shot his arrow. It flew to the north of the great river. He and his people went there and became the Klickitats. Then the Creator made a great stone bridge across the river. This bridge, the Creator said, is a sign of peace. You and your peoples can visit each other by crossing over this bridge. As long as you remain at peace, as long as your hearts are good, this bridge will stand. For many seasons the two people remained at peace. They passed freely back and forth across the great stone bridge. One day, though, the people to the north looked south toward the Willamette and said, "Their lands are better than ours." One day, though, the people to the south looked north toward the Klickitat and said, "Their lands are more beautiful than ours." Then, once again, the people began to quarrel. The Creator saw this and was not pleased. The people were becoming greedy again. Their hearts were becoming bad. The Creator darkened the skies and took fire away. Now the people grew cold. The rains of autumn began, and the people suffered greatly. "Give us back fire," they begged. "We wish to live again with each other in peace." Their prayers reached the Creator's heart. There was only one place on earth where fire still remained. An old woman named Luit had stayed out of the quarreling and was not greedy. It was in her lodge only that fire still burned. So the Creator went to Luit. "If you will share your fire with all the people," the Creator said, "I will give you whatever you wish. Tell me what you want." "I want to be young and beautiful," Luit said. "That is the way it will be," said the Creator. "Now take your fire to the great stone bridge above the river. Let all the people come to you and get fire. You must keep the fire burning there to remind the people that their hearts must stay good." The next morning the skies grew clear, and the people saw the sun rise for the first time in many days. The sun shone on the great stone bridge, and there the people saw a young woman as beautiful as the sunshine itself. Before her, there on the bridge, burned a fire. The people came to the fire and made up their quarrels. Luit gave each of them fire. Now their homes again became warm, and peace was everywhere. One day, though, the chief of the people to the north came to Luit's fire. He saw how beautiful she was and wanted her to be his wife. At the same time, the chief of the people to the south also saw Luit's beauty. He, too, wanted to marry her. Luit could not decide which of the two she liked better. Then the chiefs began to quarrel. Their peoples took up the quarrel, and fighting began. When the Creator saw the fighting, he became angry. He broke down the great stone bridge. He took each of the two chiefs and changed them into mountains. The chief of the Klickitat became the mountain we now know as Mount Adams. The chief of the Multnomas became the mountain we now know as Mount Hood. Even as mountains, they continued to quarrel, throwing flames and stones at each other. In some places, the stones they threw almost blocked the river between them. That is why the Columbia River is so narrow in the place called the Dalles today. Luit was heartbroken over the pain caused by her beauty. She no longer wanted to be a beautiful young woman. She could no longer find peace as a human being. The Creator took pity on her and changed her into a mountain also, the most beautiful of the mountains. She was placed so that she stood between Mount Adams and Mount Hood, and she was allowed to keep the fire within herself which she had once shared on the great stone bridge. Eventually, she became known as Mount St. Helens, and she slept peacefully. Though she was asleep, Luit was still aware, the people said. The Creator had placed her between the two quarreling mountains to keep the peace, and it was intended that humans, too, should look at her beauty and remember to keep their hearts good, to share the land and treat it well. If we human beings do not treat the land with respect, the people said, Luet will wake up and let us know how unhappy she and the Creator have become again. So they said, long before the day in the 1980s when Mount St. Helens woke again. How Grandmother Spider Stole the Sun, Muskogee Creek. When the earth was first made, there was no light. It was very hard for the animals and the people in the darkness. Finally, the animals decided to do something about it.
"I have heard there is something called the sun," said the bear. "It is kept on the other side of the world, but the people there will not share it. Perhaps we can steal a piece of it."
All the animals agreed that it was a good idea. But who would be the one to steal the sun? The fox was the first to try. He sneaked to the place where the sun was kept. He waited until no one was looking. Then he grabbed a piece of it in his mouth and ran. But the sun was so hot it burned his mouth and he dropped it. To this day, all foxes have black mouths because that first fox burned his carrying the sun. The possum tried next. In those days, Possum had a very bushy tail. She crept up to the place where the sun was kept, broke off a piece, and hid it in her tail. Then she began to run, bringing the sun back to the animals and the people. But the sun was so hot it burned off all the hair on her tail, and she lost hold of it. To this day, all possums have bare tails because the sun burned away the hair on that first possum. Then Grandmother Spider tried. Instead of trying to hold the sun herself, she wove a bag out of her webbing. She put the piece of the sun into her bag and carried it back with her. Now the question was, where to put the sun? Grandmother Spider told them, "The sun should be up high in the sky. Then everyone will be able to see it and benefit from its light." All the animals agreed, but none of them could reach up high enough. Even if they carried it to the top of the tallest tree, that would not be high enough for everyone on the earth to see the sun. Then they decided to have one of the birds carry the sun up to the top of the sky. Everyone knew that Buzzard could fly the highest, so he was chosen. Buzzard placed the sun on top of his head, where his feathers were the thickest, for the sun was still very hot, even inside Grandmother Spider's bag. He began to fly up and up toward the top of the sky. As he flew, the sun grew hotter. Up and up he went, higher and higher, and the sun grew hotter and hotter still. And now the sun was burning through Grandmother Spider's bag, but the buzzard still kept flying up toward the top of the sky. Up and up he went, and the sun grew hotter. Now it was burning away the feathers on top of his head, but he continued on. Now all of his feathers were gone, but he flew higher. Now it was turning the bare skin of his head all red, but he continued to fly. He flew until he reached the top of the sky, and there he placed the sun where it would give light to everyone. Because he carried the sun up to the top of the sky, Buzzard was honored by all the birds and animals. Though his head is naked and ugly because he was burned carrying the sun, he is still the highest flyer of all, and he can be seen circling the sun to this day. And because Grandmother Spider brought the sun in her bag of webbing, at times the sun makes rays across the sky, which are shaped like the rays in Grandmother Spider's web. It reminds everyone that we are all connected, like the strands of Grandmother Spider's web. And it reminds everyone of what Grandmother Spider did for all the animals and the people.
hey yo, hey ya, hey ya, hi ya, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, ho, hey yo, hey ya, ya, ho, hey yo, hey ya, hey yo, hey yo, yo, hey yo, ho, yo, hey yo, ho, hey yo. Hey yo, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, ho, hey yo, hey ya, hey yo, hey ya, hey ya, ho, hey yo, hey yo, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, ho, hey yo, hey ya.
Tunkashila, Grandfather Rock, Lakota Sioux. The Lakota Sioux people say that in the beginning everything was in the mind of Wakantonka. All things which were to be existed only as spirits. Those spirits moved about in space, seeking a place to manifest themselves. They traveled until they reached the sun, but it was not a good place for creation to begin, because it was too hot. Finally, they came to the earth, which was without life and covered with the great waters. There was no dry land at all for life to begin upon. But then, out of the waters, a great burning rock rose up. It made the dry land appear, and the clouds formed from the steam it created. Then the life on earth could begin. So it is that the rock is called Tunkashila, Grandfather Rock, for it is the oldest one. Because of that, the rocks must be respected. In the sweat lodge, when the water strikes the heated stones and that mist rises once again, it brings back the moment of creation, as the people in the lodge sing to Tunkashila, the grandfather, the old one. Old Man Coyote and the Rock, Pawnee. Old Man Coyote was going along. It was quite a while since he had eaten, and he was feeling cut in half by hunger. He came to the top of a hill, and there he saw a big rock. Old Man Coyote took out his flint knife. "Grandfather," Old Man Coyote said to the rock, "I give you this fine knife. Now help me in some way, because I am hungry." Then Old Man Coyote went along further. He went over the top of the hill, and there at the bottom was a buffalo that had just been killed. "How lucky I am," Old Man Coyote said. "But how can I butcher this buffalo without a knife? Now, where did I leave my knife?" Then Old Man Coyote walked back up the hill until he came to the big rock where his knife still lay on the ground. "You don't need this knife," he said to the big rock. Then he picked his flint knife up and ran back to where he had left the buffalo. Now, though, where there had been a freshly killed buffalo, there were only buffalo bones, and the bones were very old and gray. Then, from behind him, Old Man Coyote heard a rumbling noise. He turned around and looked up. The big rock was rolling down the hill after him.
Got-a-room, got-a-room.
Old Man Coyote began to run. He ran and ran, but the stone still rumbled after him.
Got-a-room, got-a-room.
Old Man Coyote ran until he came to a bear den. "Help me!" he called into the bears. The bears looked out and saw what was chasing Old Man Coyote. "We can't help you against Grandfather Rock," they said.
Got-a-room, got-a-room.
The big rock kept coming, and Old Man Coyote kept running. Now he came to a cave where the mountain lions lived, and he called out again. "Help me!" Old Man Coyote said. "I am about to be killed!" The mountain lions looked out and saw what was after Old Man Coyote. "No," they said, "we can't help you if you have angered Grandfather Rock."
Got-a-room, got-a-room.
The big rock kept rumbling after Old Man Coyote, and he kept running. Now he came to the place where a bull buffalo was grazing. "Help me!" Old Man Coyote yelled. "That big rock said it was going to kill all the buffalo. When I tried to stop it, it began to chase me." The bull buffalo braced his legs and thrust his head out to stop the big rock. But the rock just brushed the bull buffalo aside and left him standing there dazed, with his horns bent and his head pushed back into his shoulders. To this day, all buffalo are still like that.
Got-a-room, got-a-room.
The big rock kept rolling, and Old Man Coyote kept running. But Old Man Coyote was getting tired now, and the rock was getting closer. Then Old Man Coyote looked up and saw a nighthawk flying overhead. "My friend!" Old Man Coyote called up to the nighthawk. "This big rock that is chasing me said that you are ugly. It said you have a wide mouth, and your eyes are too big, and your beak is all pinched up. I told it not to say that, and it began to chase me." The nighthawk heard what Old Man Coyote said and grew very angry. He called the other nighthawks. They began to swoop down and strike at the big rock with their beaks. Each time they struck the big rock, a piece broke off and stopped rolling.
Got-a-room, got-a-room.
The rock kept rolling, and Old Man Coyote kept running, but now the rock was much smaller. The nighthawks continued to swoop down and break off pieces. Finally, the big rock was nothing but small pebbles. Old Man Coyote came up and looked at the little stones. My, he said to the nighthawks. "Why did you wide-mouthed, big-eyed, pinch-beaked birds do that to my old friend?" Then Old Man Coyote laughed and started on his way again. Now the nighthawks were very angry at Old Man Coyote. They gathered all of the pieces of the big rock and fanned them together with their wings. The next thing Old Man Coyote knew, he heard a familiar sound behind him again.
Got-a-room, got-a-room.
He tried to run, but he was so tired now he could not get away. The big rock rolled right over him and flattened him out. Glooskabe and the Wind Eagle, Abenaki. Long ago, Glooskabe lived with his grandmother, Woodchuck, in a small lodge beside the big water. One day, Glooskabe was walking around when he looked out and saw some ducks in the bay. "I think it is time to go hunt some ducks," he said. So he took his bow and arrows and got into his canoe. He began to paddle out into the bay, and as he paddled, he sang, "Kiowa jine yo ho hey ho, Kiowa jine, Kiowa jine." But a wind came up, and it turned his canoe and blew him back to shore. Once again, Glooskabe began to paddle out, and this time he sang his song a little harder. "Kiowa jine yo ho hey ho, Kiowa jine, Kiowa jine." But again the wind came and blew him back to shore. 4 times he tried to paddle out, and 4 times he failed. He was not happy. He went back to the lodge of his grandmother and walked right in, even though there was a stick leaning across the door, which meant the person inside was doing some work and did not want to be disturbed. "Grandmother," Glooskabe said, "what makes the wind blow?" Grandmother Woodchuck looked up from her work. "Glooskabe," she said, "why do you want to know?" Then Glooskabe answered her just as every child in the world does when they are asked such a question. "Because," he said. Grandmother Woodchuck looked at him. "Ah, Glooskabe," she said, "whenever you ask such questions, I feel there is going to be trouble, and perhaps I should not tell you. But I know that you are so stubborn you will never stop asking until I answer you. So I shall tell you. Far from here, on top of the tallest mountain, a great bird stands. This bird is named Wuchowsen, and when he flaps his wings, he makes the wind blow." "Hey, Grandmother," said Glooskabe, "I see. Now, how would one find that place where the Wind Eagle stands?" Again, Grandmother Woodchuck looked at Glooskabe. "Ah, Glooskabe," she said, "once again I feel that perhaps I should not tell you. But I know that you are very stubborn and would never stop asking. So I shall tell you. If you walk always facing the wind, you will come to the place where Wuchowsen stands." "Thank you, Grandmother," said Glooskabe. He stepped out of the lodge and faced into the wind and began to walk. He walked across the fields and through the woods, and the wind blew hard. He walked through the valleys and into the hills, and the wind blew harder still. He came to the foothills and began to climb, and the wind still blew harder. Now the foothills were becoming mountains, and the wind was very strong. Soon there were no longer any trees, and the wind was very, very strong. The wind was so strong that it blew off Glooskabe's moccasins. But he was very stubborn and kept on walking, leaning into the wind. Now the wind was so strong that it blew off his shirt, but he kept on walking. Now the wind was so strong that it blew off all his clothes, and he was naked, but he still kept walking. Now the wind was so strong that it blew off his hair, but Glooskabe still kept walking, facing into the wind. The wind was so strong that it blew off his eyebrows, but still he continued to walk. And now the wind was so strong that he could hardly stand. He had to pull himself along by grabbing hold of the boulders. But there, on the peak ahead of him, he could see a great bird slowly flapping its wings. It was Wuchowsen, the Wind Eagle. Glooskabe took a deep breath. "Grandfather!" he shouted. The Wind Eagle stopped flapping his wings and looked around. "Who calls me grandfather?" he said. Glooskabe stood up. "It's me, Grandfather. I just came up here to tell you, that you do a very good job of making the wind blow." The Wind Eagle puffed out his chest with pride. "You mean like this?" he said, and he flapped his wings even harder. The wind he made was so strong, it lifted Glooskabe right off his feet, and he would have been blown right off the mountain had he not reached out and grabbed a boulder again. "Grandfather!" Glooskabe shouted again. The Wind Eagle stopped flapping his wings. "Yes?" he said. Glooskabe stood up and came close to Wuchowsen. "You do a very good job of making the wind blow, Grandfather. This is so. But it seems to me you could do an even better job if you were on that peak over there." The Wind Eagle looked toward the other peak. "That may be so," he said. "But how would I get from here to there?" Glooskabe smiled. "Grandfather," he said, "I will carry you. Wait here." And then Glooskabe ran back down the mountain until he came to a big basswood tree. He stripped off the outer bark and from the inner bark he braided a strong carrying strap, which he took back up the mountain to the Wind Eagle. "Here, grandfather," he said, "let me wrap this around you so I can lift you more easily." Then he wrapped the carrying strap so tightly around Wulfhausen that his wings were pulled into his side, and he could hardly breathe. "Now, grandfather," Glus Gabé said, picking the Wind Eagle up, "I will take you to a better place." He began to walk toward the other peak. But as he walked, he came to a place where there was a large crevice, and as he stepped over it, he let go of the carrying strap, and the Wind Eagle slid down into the crevice, upside down, and was stuck. "Now," Glus Gabé said, "it is time to hunt some ducks." He walked back down the mountain, and there was no wind at all. He walked till he came to the tree line, and still no wind blew. He walked down to the foothills, and down to the hills and the valleys, and still there was no wind. He walked through the forests and through the fields, and the wind did not blow at all. He walked and walked until he came back to the lodge by the water, and by now all his hair had grown back. He put on some fine new clothing and a new pair of moccasins, and took his bow and arrows and went down to the bay and climbed into his boat to hunt ducks. He paddled out into the water and sang his canoeing song. "Kaiowajine, yo ho, hey ho, Kaiowajine, Kaiowajine." But the air was very hot and still, and he began to sweat. The air was so still and hot that it was hard to breathe. Soon the water began to grow dirty and smell bad, and there was so much foam on the water he could hardly paddle. He was not pleased at all, and he returned to the shore and went straight to his grandmother's lodge and walked in. "Grandmother," he said, "what is wrong? The air is hot and still, and it is making me sweat, and it is hard to breathe. The water is dirty and covered with foam. I cannot hunt ducks at all like this." Grandmother Woodchuck looked up at Glus Gabé. "Glus Gabé," she said, "what have you done now?" And Glus Gabé answered just as every child in the world answers when asked that question. "Oh, nothing," he said. "Glus Gabé," said Grandmother Woodchuck again, "tell me what you have done." Then Glus Gabé told her about going to visit the Wind Eagle and what he had done to stop the wind. "Oh, Glus Gabé," said Grandmother Woodchuck, "will you never learn? Dabaldak, the owner, set the Wind Eagle on that mountain to make the wind because we need the wind. The wind keeps the air cool and clean. The wind brings the clouds which give us rain to wash the earth. The wind moves the waters and keeps them fresh and sweet. Without the wind, life will not be good for us, for our children, or our children's children." Glus Gabé nodded his head. "Come, won't ye, Grandmother," he said. "I understand." Then he went outside. He faced in the direction from which the wind had once come and began to walk. He walked through the fields and through the forests, and the wind did not blow, and he felt very hot. He walked through the valleys and up the hills, and there was no wind, and it was hard for him to breathe. He came to the foothills and began to climb, and he was very hot and sweaty indeed. At last he came to the mountain where the Wind Eagle once stood, and he went and looked down into the crevice. There was Wulfhausen the Wind Eagle wedged upside down. "Uncle!" Glus Gabé called. The Wind Eagle looked up as best he could. "Who calls me uncle?" he said. "It is Glus Gabé, uncle. I'm up here. But what are you doing down there?" "Oh, Glus Gabé," said the Wind Eagle, "a very ugly, naked man with no hair told me that he would take me to the other peak so I could do a better job of making the wind blow. He tied my wings and picked me up, but as he stepped over this crevice he dropped me in and I am stuck.
and I am not comfortable here at all."
"Ah, Uncle, I will get you out." Then Glus Gabé climbed down into the crevice. He pulled the Wind Eagle free and placed him back on his mountain and untied his wings. "Uncle," Glus Gabé said, "it is good that the wind should blow sometimes, and other times it is good that it should be still." The Wind Eagle looked at Glus Gabé and then nodded his head.
"Grandson," he said, "I hear what you say."
So it is that sometimes there is wind, and sometimes it is still to this very day, and so the story goes. The Hero Twins and the Swallower of Clouds, Zuni. To the American Indian people of the dry Southwest, few things are more important than rain. The people speak of different kinds of rain. The male rain, which strikes hard on the earth and washes away. The female rain, which falls gently and steadily, soaking the soil. Many stories are told of the rain, and songs relate to the coming of rain. One of the corn-grinding songs of the Zuni people praises the mountains from which the rain and the clouds come. The song goes, "Clouds come rising out of my beautiful mountain. Up in the sky the rainmakers are sitting. One after another rain clouds are coming. Over there the flowers are coming. Here the young corn is growing." The clouds are powerful and benevolent, connected to the Kachinas, those helping spirits of the ancestors. So when the Zuni tell the story of the giant swallower of clouds, they tell of a very terrible monster indeed. When the world was young, they say, a giant lived in the cliffs above Canyon de Chelly. The food he lived on was human beings, and he caught the clouds and squeezed them into his mouth for drink. The people called him Swallower of Clouds, and the bravest of the men tried to destroy him. However, anyone who went out to kill the giant was never seen again. Before long, because he was swallowing all of the clouds, the snow stopped falling to the north. Because he was swallowing all of the clouds, the rain no longer came from the west. Because he was swallowing all the clouds, the mist above the mountains to the east disappeared. Because he was swallowing all the clouds, the springs to the south dried up. The crops dried up and died. The people were suffering, and some began to die. The Hero Twins saw what was happening. "We will go and kill Swallower of Clouds," they said. Then they started on their way to the cliffs where he lived. But as they were following the path to the cliffs, they saw a spider web next to the trail. "Grandmother Spider," they said, greeting the maker of webs, "are you well?" "I am well, grandchildren," said the spider. "Where are you going?" "We are going to kill the giant Swallower of Clouds," they said. "That is good," Grandmother Spider said. "But first, let me warn you. The giant has a trick. He stretches himself out on top of the cliffs. He pretends to be sleeping and then tells whoever comes to pass under his legs, which are arched over the trail. As soon as someone passes under, though, he grabs them and throws them over the cliff." "Grandmother," said the Hero Twins, "what should we do?" "Let me go ahead of you," said Grandmother Spider. "Wait for a while, and then follow." Then Grandmother Spider set out. She did not go far before she came to the giant. He was stretched out on top of the cliff with his legs over the trail. He was as huge as a hill, and his legs were bigger than tree trunks. He pretended to sleep, for he had heard the Hero Twins were coming to fight him. Grandmother Spider, though, was so small the giant did not see her. She climbed up a rock behind him and then let herself down on his forehead with a strand of silk. While he kept his eyes closed, pretending to sleep, she wove her web across his eyes so that he could not open them up. Now the hero twins, having waited for a while, started on their way. When they came close to the place where Swallower of Clouds lay, they began to sing a war song.
"Who is that?"
said Swallower of Clouds as the hero twins came closer.
"I am old and tired, too old and tired to move out of the way. Just pass under my legs."
But when the hero twins came close to the giant, they split up. One ran to the right and one ran to the left. The giant tried to open his eyes to see what they were doing, but he was blinded by the spider web.
"Where are you, little ones?"
he said, striking at them and missing.
"Just pass under my legs."
Swallower of Clouds struck again at the hero twins, but he could not see them, and he missed. Then the twins leaped up and struck him with their clubs. One struck him in the head, one struck him in the stomach. They killed Swallower of Clouds with their clubs. Then they threw him over the same cliffs where he had thrown all the people he had killed. Now the clouds were able to pass again through the mountains. The snow returned to the north. The rain came again from the west. The mists formed once more above the mountains to the east. The springs to the south flowed once more. Again the crops of the people grew, and the people were well and happy. It is said that where the giant fell, he struck so hard his feet drove into the earth. He still stands there to this day, with his blood dried red all along his great stiff body. Though some call that great stone by other names, the Zunis know it is the Swallower of Clouds. When they see it, they are thankful for the deed of the hero twins and the life-giving rain. Kulooskap and the Water Monster, Micmac and Maliseet. Once there was a great drought. The rain stopped falling, and the earth became dry. Finally, the streams themselves stopped flowing. There was a village of people who lived by the side of a stream, and life now became very hard for them. They sent someone upstream to see why the stream had stopped. Before long, the man came back. "There is a dam across the stream," he said. "It is holding back all the water. There are guards on the dam. They say their chief is keeping all the water for himself." "Go back and beg him for water," said the elders of the village. "Tell him we are dying without water to drink." So the messenger went back again. When he returned, he held a bark cup filled with mud. "This is all the water their chief will allow us to have," he said. Now the people were angry. They decided to fight. They sent a party of warriors to destroy the dam. But as soon as the warriors came to the dam, a great monster rose out of the water. His mouth was big enough to swallow a moose. His belly was huge and yellow. He grabbed the warriors and crushed them in his long fingers, which were like the roots of cedar trees. Only one warrior escaped to come back to the people and tell them what happened. "We cannot fight a monster," the people said. They were not sure what to do. Then one of the old chiefs spoke. "We must pray to Kichimanitu," he said. "Perhaps he will pity us and send help." Then they burned tobacco and sent their prayers up to the Creator. Their prayers were heard. Kichimanitu looked down and saw the people were in great trouble. He decided to take pity and help them, and called Kulooskap. "Go and help the people," Kichimanitu said. Gluskap then went down to the earth. He took the shape of a tall warrior, head and shoulders taller than any of the people. Half of his face was painted black, and half was painted white. A great eagle perched on his right shoulder, and by his side 2 wolves walked as his dogs, a black wolf and a white wolf. As soon as the people saw him, they welcomed him. They thought he was someone sent by the Creator to help them. "We cannot afford you anything to drink," they said. "All of the water in the world is kept by the monster and his dam." "Where is this monster?" Gluskap said, swinging his war club, which was made of the root of a birch tree. "Up the dry stream bed," they said. So Gluskap walked up the dry stream bed. As he walked, he saw dried up and dead fish and turtles and other water animals. Soon he came to the dam, which stretched between 2 hills. "I have come for water," he said to the guards on top of the dam.
"Give him none, give him none,"
said a big voice from the other side of the dam, so the guards did not give him water. Again Gluskap asked, and again the big voice answered,
"Give him none, give him none."
4 times he made his request, and on the 4th request Gluskap was thrown a bark cup half full of filthy water. Then Gluskap grew angry. He stomped his foot, and the dam began to crack. He stomped his foot again, and he began to grow taller and taller. Now Gluskap was taller than the dam, taller even than the monster who sat in the deep water. Gluskap's club was now bigger than a great pine tree. He struck the dam with his club, and the dam burst open, and the water flowed out. Then he reached down and grabbed the water monster. It tried to fight back, but Gluskap was too powerful. With one giant hand, Gluskap squeezed the water monster, and its eyes bulged out, and its back grew bent. He rubbed it with his other hand, and it grew smaller and smaller. "Now," Gluskap said, "no longer will you keep others from having water. Now you'll just be a bullfrog. But I will take pity on you, and you can live in this water from now on." Then Gluskap threw the water monster back into the stream. To this day, even though he hides from everyone because Gluskap frightened him so much, you may still hear the bullfrog saying, "Give him none, give him none." The water flowed past the village. Some of the people were so happy to see that water that they jumped into the stream. They dove so deep and stayed in so long that they became fish and water creatures themselves. They still live in that river today, sharing the water which no one person can ever own. How Thunder and Earthquake Made Ocean. Yurok. Thunder lived at Sumig. One day he said, "How shall the people live if there is just prairie there? Let us place the ocean there." He said to Earthquake, "I want to have water there, so that the people may live. Otherwise they will have nothing to live on." He said to Earthquake, "What do you think?" Earthquake thought. "That is true," he said. "There should be water there. Far off I see it. I see the water. It is at Opis. There are salmon there and water." "Go," said Thunder. "Go with Kingfisher, the one who sits there by the water. Go and get water at Opis. Get the water that is to come here." Then the 2 of them went. Kingfisher and Earthquake went to see the water. They went to get the water at Opis. They had 2 abalone shells that Thunder had given to them. "Take these shells," Thunder had said. "Collect the water in them." First, Kingfisher and Earthquake went to the north end of the world. There Earthquake looked around. "This will be easy," he said. "It will be easy for me to sink this land." Then Earthquake ran around. He ran around, and the ground sank. It sank there at the north end of the world. Then Kingfisher and Earthquake started for Opis. They went to the place at the end of the water. They made the ground sink behind them as they went. At Opis they saw all kinds of seals and salmon. They saw all the kinds of animals and fish that could be eaten there in the water at Opis. Then they took the water in the abalone shells. "Now we will go to the south end of the world," said Earthquake. "We will go there and look at the water. Thunder, who is at Sumic, will help us by breaking down the trees. The water will extend all the way to the south end of the world. There will be salmon and fish of all kinds and seals in the water." Now Kingfisher and Earthquake came back to Sumic. They saw that Thunder had broken down the trees. Together the three of them went north. As they went together, they kept sinking the ground. The earth quaked, and water flowed over it as Kingfisher and Earthquake poured it from their abalone shells. Kingfisher emptied his shell, and it filled the ocean halfway to the north end of the world. Earthquake emptied his shell, and it filled the ocean the rest of the way. As they filled in the ocean, the creatures which would be food swarmed into the water. The seals came as if they were thrown in handfuls. Into the water they came, swimming toward shore. Earthquake sank the land deeper to make gullies, and the whales came swimming through the gullies where that water was deep enough for them to travel. The salmon came running through the water. Now all the land animals, the deer and elk, the foxes and mink, the bear and others had gone inland. Now the water creatures were there. Then Thunder and Kingfisher and Earthquake looked at the ocean. "This is enough," they said. "Now the people will have enough to live on. Everything that is needed is in the water." So it is that the prairie became ocean. It is so because Thunder wished it so. It is so because Earthquake wished it so. All kinds of creatures are in the ocean before us because Thunder and Earthquake wished the people to live.